The focus is on local government elections. But one will need to have a clear understanding of what is the government itself in order for any conversation on elections to be meaningful. I had this habit in the past when I teach local government. Asking my class, not suggesting your class, I'm asking my class a very stupid question. That question used to be, to which local authority do you belong? Or in which local government area do you live? I'm not going to ask you that. I hope I know you know that. I hope I know you know that. In which local authority area you are residing. Because at the end of the day, that is where the action is. I also would say to my class that you have to be very careful about what you read on the question of the government. Because there are very diverse views on this question. To the extent that if you start to talk with the government, some people who live in America will tell you, well, state government is local government. They say that, and some of the literature seems to suggest that state government is local government. And so one needs to clarify from the very inception what is local government, the very inception. Now, there are really two elements that are essential to determination of what is local government. Two elements that are essential. One, an essential means without these elements, you would not be able to get what is called. The first element is that local government is all about segments of the country in their own right, rather than the country at large. Government in a particular segment of the country. So the country could be divided into segments, and government in the segment is what the government is about. Anytime you don't identify a segment as being governed somewhere or the other, they're not talking about that. So we have Georgetown as a segment of the country. And there's a government in Georgetown, it could be local government. Those halls are a segment of the country. So they are distinct geographic areas that are specific to anything called local government. The second essential factor is the kind of authority that is exercised by the government in that local area. The kind of authority exercised by the government. So you must have a combination of a specific geographic area and the exercise of authority by a government, and the kind of authority is what is critical. That is critical. Because the whole question of government and authority is centered around the question of who is sovereign. Who is sovereign? In any country, people are said to be sovereign. They're the ones who are the owners of the country and they determine what happens in the country. But from a standpoint of administration, they can't on a daily basis administer the country. And so you have to find systems and mechanisms for the administration. And so you tend to identify some sovereign authority. A sovereign authority is an authority that has ultimate and ultimate control over what happens in the country. There's no other authority that could impose and dictate to government is sovereign because it is ultimately responsible for decision making in relation to the country. Now, against that background, you can disaggregate sovereignty into three groups. Sovereign itself, in that you have one authority that is ultimately responsible and uncontrolled by anyone else, conducting the affairs of the country. That's a sovereign. That's ideal. But you have countries like the United States, which because of their historical evolution, do not have that one ultimate sovereign. Rather, they have something called intra-sovereign relationship. So sovereignty is not exercised by an ultimate one authority. It is exercised by a collective. And in America, that collective would be the states, the government of the states, and the federal government. So if you were to read the American Constitution, you would see the federal government cannot make certain decisions on the concurrence of the states because they're collectively the sovereign. And that collective sovereign has said to the federal, here's what you can do without interference, here's what we can do without interference, and here's what we have to do collectively. That makes it a collective sovereign. And that is why in a country like America, you can have one state where you can have abortions, because it is their authority in that state to make a decision about abortions. And another state that you can't have abortion because it is their authority to make decisions about abortion. They are partially exercising sovereignty insofar as those areas are concerned. The education system is similar as well. When you bring them all together in that intra-relationship, then that's the sovereign. Right? So the states can be said to be intra-sovereign. The states are part of the sovereign. Right? That's important to understand. Because if you understand that, then you understand why they're not local government. Because local government is not intra-sovereign, it's not part of the sovereign. It is infra-sovereign. Infra, I-N-F-R-A. That means it is below, inferior to, subordinate to the sovereign. States are not subordinate, they are part of. They're not superior, they're not subordinate, they are part of. Local government is infra-sovereign, subordinate to the sovereign. So it is not the ultimate authority in the country. It's not the ultimate authority in the country. It gets its authority from the sovereign. So in the case of Ghana, for example, our local authorities are enshrined in the Constitution. Only in the speaking common country that nation, we provide for local authorities, local government in the Constitution. But even though it's enshrined in the Constitution, its establishment, to some extent, and its authority are devolved from the central government. In other words, it's the central government which has ultimate authority that passes all authority to the local government. Right? They can pass it on, they can take it back, and that emphasizes the infra-sovereign nature. They are subject to the rule of the sovereign. They are not themselves the sovereign. They are not a part of the sovereign. They are subordinate to the sovereign. So why would you want to have local government? I've skipped a big part where you want to have state government. That's another discussion. Why would you therefore want to have local government if they are inferior and subordinate to the South? Well, the local government serves two purposes. I would say it serves a political purpose, it serves an administrative purpose. Two purposes. Politically, the government is intended to enhance governance, enhance democracy. Because what it provides for is a greater involvement of the people in the administration of their country. Right? In that regard, you can associate local government with decentralization of power, decentralization of authority. And it seeks to involve more people in the administration of the country. Because when local authorities are established, they're given authority to do certain things. It means the people in the central government is no longer doing those things. It means other people are doing those things. So it provides for a greater involvement of people in the administration of matters of the state. And these people are then involved at the local level in things which could be done locally. Secondly, it is argued that there are efficiencies and economies of scale to be derived by having some things done away from the center. If the center is involved in everything, it may be inefficient. And if you have people doing it locally, they will likely to be more efficient. So from an administrative perspective, local government stands the chance of delivering certain goods and services more efficiently than the central government did. And I would dare say, if you combine the fact that they are involved in decision making at the local level and the administration, they may also deliver it more effectively. It means they will be able to achieve the aims and objectives of whatever is intended to be done. So that local government really is intended to give people an opportunity to be involved in the decision making at the local level, which decision making can impact on the efficient and effective delivery of goods and services locally. And so in that way, matters of the state are said to be better handled than if things were done from the center. So for example, local people tend to know things historically about the area. And if they're involved in decision making, they can bring that historical knowledge to bear on decision making and make right decisions. People in the center do not necessarily have that knowledge. If they were to come in and try to make decisions sometimes, they can make wrong decisions. Things like weather patterns, for example. Many people know what the weather patterns are, when to do what. Water flow. They know those things. And the knowledge is passed down from generation to generation. So they, in some regards, know what's best for the local area. And so should bring to bear that knowledge on decision making and therefore provide for effective implementation. Effective meaning that you are doing something that will achieve the objective intended. That's what effective means. That you're achieving the objective intended. Efficiency means you're making the best use of the resources. That's economics. But you can make the best economic use of a resource in the sense that you get the best out of what you've done for the dollar, but it might end up being ineffective. Because when you finish doing all that nice economics, thinking about it, it's not doing what it's intended to do. So you have to be both efficient and effective. And the government can provide that efficiency, that effectiveness, and also provides from a political perspective people's involvement in the decision making, people's involvement in the administration of their own affairs. Now, that poses a big question. What nation? How do they have their own affairs in that context? Well, one could look at all of the things that governments do. Collect taxes, enforce the law, provide services in terms of redress for legal problems, provide health services, educational services, a whole range of things governments do. Right? So the question is, how do we decide which of these things should be done locally? There's an argument that some things are best done locally because on one hand they concern only the local people. On the other hand, the local people are best able to make determinations about those things. So let's try to get some examples clear as well. If there's a playground in your community, whose business is that? It's your business. But it has to do central government. It's your community. It's your playground. Right? Now, central government may be providing recreational services, but do they need for the center to regulate in a community a playground? Wouldn't that be better regulated by the people locally? Well, that's the way we determine what services local government provides. What are the things they can best do because those things are common to that community and has nothing to do with outside of the community. And therefore the community itself administers those things. I gave a very simple example of a playground, because I thought that would be one that unquestionable. I mean, we should have one in this community, shouldn't we? Right? And if we have one in this community, where do you want to do some sports? We see the applications for use of that ground. When you can have a local administration being used it. And so there are other goods and services of that sort. Let's take, for example, garbage disposal. Do you need the central government to be involved in garbage disposal in the entire country? Are they going to bring all the garbage to some central place? No. Garbage disposal tend to be relatively local. Right? And so the local authority can go around and garbage disposal. What about markets? Don't you need a marketplace almost in every community? Why central government should be involved in markets so people can run the market? Abattoirs. Some communities are good at cattle rearing and things like that, and the industry they're involved in. Why don't the central government to come and control the abattoir directly? So there are a number of things that can be done at the local level. And so that is what tends to determine what authority is involved under local government authority. Things that they can do at the local level. And need not have the intervention in the day-to-day administration of the central government. They can make the decisions locally, they're close to the people, what the people want, the things are close to them, and so they can effectively control those things. And so what you find in countries sometimes is that you have tiers of local government, tiers of local government. In other words, you can have a small area that represents a certain kind of local government. And you can have a bigger area, including the small areas, that represents another level of local government. And then you can have central government. And so, for example, in Guyana, we have neighborhood democratic councils as our basic units of local government. But those neighborhood democratic councils are themselves a part of regions. And here's the bomb now, which are also local government. Why? Because they meet the elements, essential elements. Regions are local. They're a segment, and they don't have sovereign authority. They have infra-sovereign authority, so they're also local government. So you have your neighborhood democratic councils at one level, you have your regions at another level, and you have your central government for the whole country. And so, if you look at Guyana again, you could see the rationale. If you look at agriculture in Guyana, you would know, for example, no village has its own irrigation authority. No village has a source of water for agriculture for a village. None. Those sources of water tend to be a larger catchment. And so, when you hear with the Demerara Conservancy, it's a catchment from Mahaika to the Demerara River that captures water coming from the highlands and is used to irrigate for sugar and rice. Right? So the village can't look after that because it's one system feeding all those villages. So that's how you rationalize another level of local government. You need not have central government look at that because it's not for the whole country, but it's for a bigger part than the small part. And so regions, for example, would look after your drainage and irrigation system. We don't have enough resources to have schools in every, high schools at least, in every neighborhood. Right? So you may have across 2 neighborhoods, 1 high school. So you can't have a neighborhood looking after the school because it's not a neighborhood school. The region looks after the education system, delivery, physical delivery of education. And so in that way you tend to rationalize what is done by each level of government. Now in one country you don't have 2 currencies. It's one currency. So that can only be the responsibility of central government. In one country you don't have 2 defense forces. It's only one. So that can only be responsibility of central government. In one country you don't have 2 tax systems. It's only one. And that can only be responsibility of central government. So I'm showing you that central government has what it does, regional government has what it does, and neighborhood government has what it does. And so, in that way, you have the different levels of government being allocated to different areas of operation. Bearing in mind that central government is the ultimate sovereign, that these other levels, the authorities evolve, so they have this kind of semi-autonomous. They're allowed to do things without interference, right? Without interference from central government. But at the end of the day, central government is ultimately involved for all that happens in the country, but not ultimately involved in the operation of what happens from the country. It should also be noted that what local government does as well is to provide for representation by local people of issues that are not necessarily purely local. So, for example, we have GPL. That's a centralized system. We're not going to have a GPL in every village. Economies don't dictate that. Centralized system, an integrated grid so you can move power from one place to another and all of that. But the local people, through their local government, now have an opportunity to have a representative body that can speak to GPL in relation to the service they're getting. So though the service is a national service, there's a local interest. And so your local authority could be the body that speaks to GPL and says, look, we want road lights. We want road lights come, give us road lights. And they can speak to GT&T. We want 10-4. They can speak to GWI. We want water. So those services are national services. Local government provides for the interaction between the local people and the non-local services in relation to the delivery of the service in the local area. And so in that sense, the government is also a representative body, as a part of the representation of the people to agencies that are not necessarily local agencies in an effort to get the best of services from those agencies which are not local agencies. Now, the way in which local government is established differs from country to country. In some countries, they're merely appointed. And when they're merely appointed by the central government, then their role is more administrative than representative, because they're functionaries to get things done. But in other countries, they're elected. And so when they're elected, they're more involved in the democratic process of representation. And so in Guyana, for example, all local authorities are elected. So the extent to which they're elected is the extent to which they're not only overseeing the administration of goods and services, but they are part of the process of representing interests of people, because they're supposed to be the local representatives. So those people, in relation to the services that they're providing on one hand, and in relation to the interaction with the other agencies that are also providing services which are not purely local services. And so we come to the point of having a system where we have elections for local authorities, so that they have a government in those elected people that in some senses mirrors your central government. Because the government and the local authority, on one hand, they make decisions similar to how Parliament makes decisions. And on the other hand, they have an administration similar to the ministries that actually deal with goods and services. And they have other elements that mirror central government. They can have a police force, for example, but normally call it constabulary. That's specific to local things, like guarding the market, which is a local market. So they have an element of law enforcement, they have administration of local services, and they have decision-making authority in relation to things local. So, for example, construction of houses. It's a local authority that gives initial approval for the construction of houses or buildings. It's a local authority. They sign off on them. It may go somewhere else for some subsequent approval, but it starts local. Some other activities, they're also responsible for giving permission for those activities in the local area. So we come to the element of elections. Electoral systems differ from place to place, country to country, based on history and based on reality. Based on the realities. Up to 1994, the electoral system for municipalities and neighborhood urban councils was uniform and was based on a list system and proportional representation. In this system and proportional representation. But let me just digress a bit and say, we notice me referring to municipalities and the local councils. Municipalities are the local authorities found in the urban areas, or the towns and the city. And that's why we now have 9 municipalities. Riverton, Rose Hall, Amsterdam, Georgetown, Linden, Anne Regina, Lethem, Amuma, and Bartica. Those are our 9 municipalities. And then we have 62 neighborhood democratic councils. Don't ask me to list them all. But they're essentially located on the coast. Region 6, Region 5, Region 4, Region 3, and Region 2. That's essentially our local authorities. So we have 62 of those. And so the system was one of proportional representation, where a political party, the system was, up to 94, where a political party or a community group could contest simply by putting up a list of candidates, contesting under a party symbol or logo, where the voter simply votes for the party, and the seats are allocated in proportion to the number of votes applied. So if we had two parties participating, and you have 100 votes, and you have 10 seats, and one party gets 60% of the votes, they get 6 seats. Another party gets 40% of the votes, they get 4 seats. Proportional representation. In that way, it is the party that puts up the list, and it's the party at the end of the elections who draw from the list persons whom they wish to be the representatives on the local authority. So it's party driven. You could have variations of that, where, for example, the party would put up a list, puts up the list in order of priority. So you know when you go to vote, if the party gets 1 seat, the person at the top of the list is the person who will be That's a closed list. But in our circumstances, it was an open list. People are listed alphabetically, and the party picks any of its Tom, Dicks, or Harrys to put in there when they get enough seats. So you don't know in advance who you're voting for in terms of the person, you know which party you're voting for. That's what pertained to 1994. What we pertain now is slightly different. Now the system has been split into 2 parts. They are retaining the list part for 50% of the seats. So when you go to vote, there will be a party or a group. No names are there, no one has submitted the names, and you will vote for the party or the group. And they will use that to determine how 50% of the seats are allocated. What they've also done is in each local authority, they've created constituencies. And the constituencies are equivalent to 50% of the seats. So Georgetown has 30 seats, 50 you will vote for in that PR arrangement, and the other 50 you will vote for in your constituency. So there are 15 constituencies in Georgetown. That allows for a party to develop a rep to run in the constituency, a group to develop a rep to run in the constituency. Also allows for an individual who's not from a party, or not from a group, ostensibly or supposedly, so run for that constituency seat. And so what will happen, when you go to vote, the ballot paper will have 2 parts. The first part you vote for the PR, the list, the party of choice, or your group of choice. The second part you vote for your person of choice. Who the person may be from a party, it will be an identified person. So you know you may be the A or B or C. And those persons will be elected on the first past the post system. The highest number of votes, the person with the highest number of votes is the council. Not the majority of votes, the highest number. Because if you split those votes up across many candidates, the person might not get a majority, but he will get the plurality, the highest number of all the contestants. And before that person is elected. Councils then will be made up of 15 that the parties will pick based on their allocation, and the 15 that you would have picked based on your vote. And then the council will sit and determine who they want to be the mayor, or who they want to be the chairperson, who they want to be the deputy chair, who they want to be the deputy mayor. Right? And so there is always this confusion, partly caused by Vincent. Vincent for mayor. Yeah. But there's no mayoral election. Yeah. Elections are for councillors. But the party could strategically, in its campaign, identify its potential candidate for the mayor as a drawing card. So that's the strategy you can use. For the popular person, you say, well, I like the person for mayor, therefore I'm going to give that person's party or candidates the votes so they get in there, they can vote the person who is mayor. But there's no direct election for mayor in our system. The election is for councillors. Councils will then determine the mayor, deputy mayor, chairperson, vice chairperson, and they will also from among themselves determine the various subcommittees of the council, or the various committees of the council. There are some committees that are mandatory, they must have, finance committee, works committee. There are others that are optional, social welfare committee, for example. And those committees have the authority, or the council has the authority to co-opt citizens to sit in those committees as well. So you can have non-council members sitting on those committees. So it's to broaden the involvement and to get people who are knowledgeable to sit on those committees. And so that is where the work goes on. In the council, the decision making, the monitoring, and in the administration. Now for the mayor and city council, the administration will be town clerk and staff. The city council has what we call statutory officers. They are prescribed by law. The town clerk is prescribed by law, the CCGA is prescribed by law, the treasurer is prescribed by law, the health officers is prescribed by law. Those they must have. The law says they must have them. In the villages, in the neighborhood, the overseer is prescribed by law. So that's an officer we must have. In the villages, in the neighborhood councils, the chairperson straddles the executive and the policy-making body. Because the chairperson has to come in from time to time to do some administrative things, signing checks and things like that, and assisting in decision-making administratively. That person straddles administration and policy. In the city councils, town councils, the clerk is the head of administration, and the functions are prescribed by law. From a legal perspective, our municipalities are controlled by the Municipal and District Council Act, and that's chapter 28 of 1. The Municipal and District Council Act that prescribes how they should operate. In terms of neighbor democratic councils, they are under the Local Government Act, chapter 28 of 2. They are under the Local Government Act, chapter 28 of 2. So you have different acts.
You need to record it.
You have the Municipal and District Councils Act that regulates the municipalities. That would be the 8 towns and the city. And then you have the Local Government Act that regulates the neighborhood. That's the 62 neighborhood democratic councils. And they prescribe in those acts, statutory officers, the functions, the revenue collection ability, and all of that with various bodies. But we need to note that for the administration of local affairs, local authorities are authorized to raise revenue. in various ways. The main revenue stream seems to be the rates that they levy on property. The main revenue stream. But in addition to that, they get revenue through fees and things like that. So market fees, outdoor fees, and other fees they may use to get revenue as well. Rentals and things like that. But in addition to the revenue that they themselves generate, they get a subvention from central government. Now there's absolutely nothing some people tend to suggest that, why central government has to give people money. Well, we are taxpayers. Central government collects PAY from all of us, right? And therefore, it's almost a mechanism for distributing central revenue for local purposes. You're the beneficiary of taxes you pay that way. So it's normal across the globe for central government to give revenue, to give subventions through various mechanisms, grants, and so forth, to local authority. What we need to note in the case of Ghana is that previously these monies were given arbitrarily, and some may argue capriciously. They now put in place a system of fiscal transfers, nothing new across the globe, whereby a formula will determine how much of the allocation for local authorities is given to a specific local authority. That formula is based on three factors: physical size of the local authority, population size, and their own history of rate collection. So the more you could collect your own rates, the factor is higher for the purpose of subvention from central government. And so you will have a large sum that the Parliament will allocate for local authorities, and then the ministry will do the calculation based on the formula and say, well, this sum you get so because of your population, the geographic size, and your history of your collection. And in that way, there will no longer be an arbitrary distribution to local authorities. In addition to that, local authorities are authorized with permission of central government also to interact with donor agencies to get funding from donor agencies. They may also be involved in other forms of revenue raising. For example, bonds, issuing of bonds. They could do that with the permission of central government. They can get involved in things like lottos, with the permission of central government. In fact, the lotto that has been so controversial in Guyana was first the idea of the mayor of the city council of Georgetown. It was for me agreed all what he's worth or not worth. He brought the idea from Canada that we should have a lotto. And the government at that time says, no. The church is not going to like it, it's gambling, so let's not do it. Churches will want. But apparently the churches have greater reaction to the local government than the central government. So apparently they said, when that matter was settled for local, the central government took the same line. But local authorities can be involved in things like lottos to raise funds. Parking as well, that's another area where central government is not giving our local authorities the scope to introduce meters, parking and things like that. But those are things they could do to raise revenue. In relation to their staff, in the Municipal District Councils Act of 1969, there's a provision for a local government commission. And the role of that commission was to lead the staff. The commission was never established. In the absence of its establishment, the minister and the prime minister became responsible for staffing matters. And we know what has come of that. Well, under the reform, Constitution now, not the Local Government Act. The Constitution is provided for a Local Government Commission. That should be responsible for staffing. It may delegate its authority to the local authorities for low-level staffing. But not only staffing, for generally regulating local authorities and being involved in conflict resolution between and among local authorities. So in that regard, some power is being shifted from the minister into the hands of what should be an independent constitutional commission to look after matters of staffing. So that they relate, like the Public Service Commission or the Police Service Commission, relate to the local authorities in relation to their staffing. And so, in a sense, I've covered 3 elements of the reform. The electoral system is an element of the reform. The commission is an element of the reform. The fiscal transfer is an element of the reform. And then there are some umbrella provisions to bring everything in, to synchronize these new arrangements with the old law. And that's another element of the local government reform that you must have heard so much about over the last, how many years? From 2003, I think it was, over the last 12 years. Those are the elements of the reform. So that, in closing, you should now have an idea of the critical nature of local government. Because at the end of the day, local authorities are in a position to affect your daily lives, the decisions they make, starting from taxes, granting the provision for houses, providing services, and things like that. They are not as removed from you as you think they are. And so it is advantageous for the citizens to be involved, so they influence the people who will be elected to run their affairs, because they will run their affairs. People complaining about drainage and irrigation and a whole range of things, which really are the purview of the local authority. Right? Much of the little irritants in Georgetown, drainage, bridges, roads, mosquitoes, lights, the markets, abattoir, they're all under the city council. It's not central government. They're all under the city council. So that local authority is about things that are very close to people's lives. In addition to that, local authorities can be involved in activities such as empowerment activities. For example, they can become involved in facilitating small industry, establishment of small industry. They can create incentives, they can create infrastructure, so that job creation, economic growth in the local level can be influenced by a local authority based on what they do or what they do not do. And so they can impact significantly, collectively, on national development, as much as they can impact on local development specifically. So local authorities are the concern of citizens. Youth programs, recreation, drama, all of those things can be dealt with by a local authority. Literacy, they can get involved in all of those things. They can use their physical facilities to provide space for activities for young people, for adults, for the elderly. They can seek donor funds to have projects that focus on local activities and local development. And they could be a significant driving force in national development if only they recognize the capacity they have, if only they have the kind of leadership that's innovative and come up with ideas to do things that that perspective, I commend the government to you. And in closing, finally, I am one of the persons who strongly feel that we live in a plural society. I have that conviction. There are others who don't agree with me, but their thesis is bifocal, it's not bicommunal, not plural. And I think it's plural because I think there are three major groups in our society. Major. Amerindians, Afro-Chinese, and the Igbo. They're major partly because of the historical antecedents. They have different historical origins. They may have difference of values to some extent. Difference of values. One of the times when the difference of values very obviously is the funeral. Go to an Afro-Chinese funeral and go to the Indo-Chinese funeral, they'll be able to see. It's just a different approach to life. Right? And there are other areas, differences. Now, nobody should really interfere with anybody's values. It's your business. We need to have mutual respect for people's way of life. Once their way of life does not impinge on the overall way of life, because you also have commonalities. So you can't have one group's way of life impinging on the rest of the country's way of life in a way that you interfere with individual groups' way of life. So there must be mutual respect with some commonality in national level on certain things. But the point I want to make is that if you look at our demographics, you will see that we have, in many instances, ethnic enclaves. And our local authorities reflect those to a large extent, ethnic enclaves. And my argument is that we could reduce the amount of national contention about power and resources if we allow local government to do more for the local areas. People look after their own business. And let's stop this nonsense of somebody with top giving largely to people as they feel fit and creating contentions about your racial and you're looking after your own and things like that. If we allow, as far as local authorities can deal with matters, then they deal with those matters locally. And the tendency will be for people to be in their own little enclaves and what have. The things local authorities look after, we need people to talk about race, cleaning the trench, getting lights, are common issues. And so it can lend to better administration of the state as opposed to high-handed central involvement that sometimes is seen to be influenced by the political game of elections. I have to do this or that because I want to be elected. Of course, this is a hard sell for the politicians, but for me, it is one of the things we need in this country to reduce the level of nonsense that takes place centrally in the game of politics. Thank you.
So now we're going to open the floor for questions. So, shall we see who's answer first? So we can just go around asking the questions, and I'm going to see when we're coming to the end of the question, answering questions.
One of the questions I have concerns it was into history. Why exactly, what are the factors which resulted in us not having the parliament elections since 1994? Not just for myself, but for persons here who may not necessarily know, there was some talk of an agreement between the parties at that time to defer, and then whatever happened after that.
Yeah, there are two factors, I think. We should have had the women election in 1997. held every 3 years. 97, it was superseded by national elections based on the court ruling that we should have had that was the court ruling. This was superseded by national elections because having had elections in 92, 97 we withdrew for national elections, and where the two are clashing, then local should give way to national. So in 97 they gave way that way. After 97, with the agreement on constitutional reform, it was agreed that we would put off the local elections pending constitutional reform. That came about in 2001, 2002. Constitutional reform then introduced new elements for local government. And so it was further agreed that we set up a task force for the establishment of the reform, and that we would hold off the elections until the task force finished its work. Now, that was supposed to be 18 months. If I'm not mistaken, it took 8 years. I don't want to go into why it took 8 years. It took 8 years, and that 8 years saw a consensual deferral of local elections, with Parliament agreed every year to postpone the elections for the next year. But then there were some, after that, I think there were issues where the government, in the latter years, did not call the elections when they could have called them. First they said we'd have national force and things like that. So there seemed to be other political issues in the latter part. But initially it was a collective activity of postponement. In the last 3 to 4 years, it had to do with wrangling in Parliament and things like that, and the central government not proceeding. In fact, GCOM in 2010 had started preparing for the election. Had gone some way in this preparation, and then it was not held, and all that happened in Parliament, the road, national elections, and all that. So, on one hand, there's collective responsibility for a greater part of the period. On the other hand, I think that the government has to take responsibility. The government of the day has to take responsibility for the latter years. The elections not being held. There was one little intrigue in all of that. The mayor and the chairperson for the municipality and the neighborhood respectively, they're elected annually. Their elections annual. In the postponement of the elections, starting from 1997, there was no consensus in Parliament on the question of postponing the internal elections. But the government used its majority to postpone not only the overall election of councillors, but the internal elections. It was the government that used the majority to say they would also not have their own elections, or elections of chairpersons. Those could have been held. It was the view of the opposition at that time. They should have been held, but they were not held. And that's why I am sometimes annoyed about the way in which Greenism associated with others, when in fact the survival had to do with that continuous postponement. It was facilitated.
Mr. Alexander, first of all, thank you for your presentation. I would like to ask a question. One of the challenges I think is that there seeming to be lack of a policy of having youth fully involved in the management of the country. And in light of the local government reform laws, do you think that there is now a greater opportunity for youth to be involved in local government, and how?
The law itself does not directly address the question you're asking. But the extent to which groups can be involved, the extent to which individuals can be involved, is the extent to which youths can take advantage of the opportunity to be involved. So in other words, if you're a young person and you've been active in your community, gain recognition, and you can present yourself without any relationship to a party as a candidate and take it from there. Young people could become integral in groups and drive groups as well at these elections. That's the scope.
So Alexander, I just wanted to find out from you if you could shed some more light based on the fact that there's now been talk of a constitutional reform and the process by which elections are now held. Is there going to be a continuous change in the process from the list and proportional representation of how elections are held, or is there going to be a further elaboration of as to proportional and listing elections now being held again?
All right, I don't know. Let me say this to you. I have had the privilege of being involved. I was a commissioner of the Constitutional Reform Commission. I was a commissioner. When we went to elections in 2001, we used the regions as constituencies as a matter of convenience because the court said we should have elections by 2001. The driving idea at that time was that we would have a system of more constituencies and less top-up. You have a system of 25 seats by constituencies and 40 top-up. The difference in results in this country, you don't need 40 to top-up anything. You can top-up with 5 or 10 seats. The idea of constituencies is really to create connectivity between the voter and the elected person. And so, even if we don't have a reform as touted, that was an outstanding matter that we were supposed to get back to in the Parliament after the 2001 elections. We check the records of the oversight, report of the oversight committee, we were committed to that process. There's a history about the electoral system. Our country traditionally had a first past the post system. That first past the post system did not allow for proportional representation in the context of the plurality of the society. And there was a whole hullabaloo that's still a debate as to whether the British or the Americans and whoever caused it. And the fact of the matter is that the system was changed in 1964 to provide for PR. Because prior to 64, the PPP would win 40-something% of the votes and get 60-something% of the seats. That was the reality. Subsequent to PR, it evened out. And so in 64, the combination of the TUF and the PNC had a greater number of votes and therefore a greater number of seats. And 64 was not the era of real elections. At least not yet. Nobody contested the results in 64. It led to a change in government. So the idea of PR in Guyana was to bring about proportionality, given the ethnic composition of the country and the way in which constituencies could be manipulated to give results. However, there's a deficiency in the PR system. It gives the party and the leader one-manship, as opposed to a relationship between MPs and citizens. And so the constitutional reform process was trying to bring a balance. So, all right, we want to retain the PR idea because of the history, but we want to put in as much constituency relationship as possible. And that's where we started moving in the direction of constituencies in the national election. Now, you might even realize there are 10 constituencies, but we have multi-member constituencies, so that we have 7 parliamentarians who are from Region 4, for Region 4. But because of the large area, and 7, you know who's who. If you have smaller constituencies, you can know this is the person,
Yes.
right? And then you could have a system where when you go to vote, You know who is the person you're voting for. Right now you're voting a list on those constituencies. So it is desirable, and the local government system has moved a little further than the national system in terms of constituencies. So we have 50%. That's a consensus. There are those of us who thought that the local government we go full constituencies. But we didn't get the concurrence of the then government. They didn't want to move full constituencies for whatever reason. So we stuck with 50% constituencies and 50% individual list up to the list. So what happens in the future is a matter of what the people want and how they go about getting it.
Good evening, everyone. My first question is, how do local government accountable? And that in terms of access to information and appeal mechanisms.
Beautiful question. Accountability here obviously means more than financial accountability. Means more than that. From the standpoint of financial accounting, local authorities are subjected to audits like anyone else. So the general has a role to play in the audits. Local authorities should be an open house. In other words, their meetings should not be closed meetings. Citizens are entitled to attend their meetings and to hear what they're seeing, what they're deciding, and things like that. That introduces an element of, some element of accountability because the people watching it. And particularly where you have constituencies. People looking to see, I vote for you, what you say, what you're doing. So the constituency is a critical element of accountability to the local authorities in any electoral system. So the introduction of constituencies helps. The local authority is supposed to publish its budget. So citizens should know what's on that budget. Right? Then the local authorities are supposed to publish their accounts, separate the part from the audit at the end of the year. So citizens can go and see those accounts and see what has happened with the money. So that's a part of the institutional arrangement. They should also be able to have a relationship with communities in relation to the projects. So for example, if you have a project going on within a community, the citizens should be able to monitor that project and see if they're getting bang for the dollar. You know, you can literally go and see what kind of material you're using. Because very often these are ways in which corruption is perpetuated. You have a good document, it has green heart, and somebody turns up with some other hardwood. The bill says green heart, but the wood ain't green. And some green things happen in some other places. So you physically monitoring projects is a part of what you provide for the accountability. And the electoral process should be used to enforce that because you vote out or vote in based on the conduct of the council and the councillors in the three-year period. There is a mechanism in Guyana for non-functioning councils to be removed by virtue of complaint and investigation. Right? So that mechanism is there as well. They have not gone ahead with some of the things that are in the report of the reform, one of which is a mechanism for recall. One of the ideas which we pushed was that there should be a recall mechanism. If a council is not functioning, you can recall the council and have a by-election for someone else. They haven't put that in the law. But that is one of the ways we thought that they can be more accountable. You know that the people watching you, tomorrow morning they could sit down and there's a certain number of petitions, a certain number of signatures, you go home and you have a new election. So I don't think we've gone the full haul in terms of accountability, but there are some mechanisms in place for accountability.
Yes, sir.
There's been call for reform in so many things. Should there be a call for reform in terms of guarantee us local elections?
Guarantee what?
Guarantee us local elections, local government elections. Because I would imagine that it was postponed for many years, X amount of years.
It's like deciding not to.
So there must be a gap somewhere. So should there be a call for reform to plug that gap? For
Or
I
if
wouldn't
there's a
say
gap.
so. I think a part of our culture is not always the law. You know. Part of our problem is not always the law. Part of our problem is the culture. The law could do so much. It is people who administer the law. These elections were postponed by Parliament. Is the Parliament we vote for postpone the election? Right? You know? If we don't,
So then should we have something on paper to guarantee us?
what guarantee could we have? If Parliament has the authority, the only guarantee you could have. Look, let me tell you something I did. Last year I approached a lawyer, asking him if he would take a case to go to the court saying they must have elections. Reason being that in 2014, there was no legal postponement of the election and it wasn't held. 2013, the legal postponement. In 2014, it was not postponed legally. And nobody said anything. I went to the lawyer and said, look, man, I want to carry this case. Right? And he tell me busy and we are where we are where we are now. So that there are some mechanisms available, but you know, to get them to work. To get them to work. The elections were not legally postponed in 2014. They should have been held. The parliament, the government, whoever was in breach of the law in 2014. In some countries, the whole country will come out. You know? So part of the problem is consciousness as well. People's knowledge of what should be. You know? And more non-partisan politics in certain issues. Not to follow the lead of the country.
All right. My question has to do with the beginning of your statement with sovereignty and infra-sovereignty, and really understanding where local government ends and where central government begins and all that. Because in the previous administration, a lot of people say there was like this whole deterioration of the local government system in terms of things like building codes, for example, zoning laws. And so what you found is that you didn't know where the city council had power and where central housing and planning had power. And you had commercial buildings being set up in residential areas, and then how do you really tax them, whether as commercial entities or residential entities? You had the issue of one entertainment place being able to use the promenade gardens without the consent of city council, given that power by central government. And so really and truly the question is, what mechanisms are available to ensure that the powers of the local government are not infringed on by central government, especially when you know that they should have these particular powers?
All right, two things. I go back to the same answer I gave just now. Part of the problem is political culture. Right? The laws are pretty clear on some of these things. The laws are pretty clear, but the way our politics is does not uphold the law. In the reform, I talked earlier about the establishment of the Government Commission. The idea behind the commission is some of the authority, which is vested in the minister, has been removed from the minister. So there is less intervention in local matters by the minister. And where there are issues, it is the commission that should now resolve those issues. Right? So hopefully that will help in reducing the intervention of the central government in things local. Because the law prescribes what local should be doing as opposed to what central should be doing, what local should be responsible for. But if you get a council that is politically driven, then they give way. They give way to the central because it's the party boss. And that's why the political system requires development. This reduction of the party boss, this one-manship, to more constituencies, more relationship between representatives and people. Those are the things we need to really change our system. A lot of the laws are there and not necessarily bad laws.
I have one question. The previous issue between Suba and the mayor, and even currently, where we have some instances where the mayor is giving persons permission, and then we hear that the town clerk has given a different different call on a particular situation. Who has the authority between the mayor and this and
The mayor has no executive authority.
Yeah.
the mayor has no
The
executive.
law prescribes who has executive authority. The town clerk is subject to the decision of the council. The town clerk is subject to the decision of the council. It's unequivocal. There are certain things that are in the purview of the town clerk, but they are subject to the overall oversight and decision of the council. There are certain things in the purview of the engineer, certain things in the purview of the health officer. The mayor's job is to monitor what these guys are doing and call them to boards at the council meeting or the committee meeting. The mayor's job is to go to his constituents, find out what they want, and to go back to council and get decisions to give them what they want. The mayor is not in charge of the assets. The mayor is in charge of policy. I call the mayor the force among equals in that council. Right? But again, the political culture. We got a boss man culture. The mayor's boss man. So you don't sit down with the mayor's boss man. So it is for young people to understand these things and not to perpetuate what has been happening for years.
My question to you now would be, in light of what you say, how do we change that, and how do we ensure that there's a guarantee that? My question to you is, how do we change that, and how do we ensure that what occurs will be subjected to law as it should be?
Whether you like it or not, at the end of the day, people get what they want. At the end of the day, people get what they want. If they don't know what they want, then they got a problem. If they don't go for what they want, they got a problem. They get what they want. All of history is shown that people get what they want. All of history. Contemporary history, ancient history, people get what they want. If they don't want nothing, they don't get nothing. Right? We have a problem with our political culture. Our culture is a boss man culture. So that you allow the boss man to do what he wants to do. Once you are a boss man, who will below you? That's the kind of culture right now. It is not about the collective will and the good of all. It's individualism. Individualism. So I understand that I don't hear, I can't touch he, but I can touch he. And I fight with he if he'd allow me to do what I want to do. So you're in the youth club. You're in the youth club, right? And you ask the treasurer for a financial report. And what's his response? You think of the Steve? You ever heard that? You think of the Steve? He's supposed to report. But the idea of you think of the Steve is a veil. Right? Trust me. Right? Accountability says there's certain things that must be done. And you're obligated to do them. You can't come with this attitude that you are my enemy if I ask you to account. No, you don't want it. So we have to inculcate that culture. Our society is riddled with a culture of not accounting. Right? It's riddled with it. Right? One of the biggest problems this government probably has is the government change, the people in change. Right? One of the biggest problems they probably have. So people still want the government to behave the same way. But for we, so we and them.
Yes.
Yes.
Question again. Are there provisions in place for a policy variation in terms of the different municipalities and NDCs? Because I'm thinking, you talked about Afro-Guyanese and Indo-Guyanese living separate lives and culture and whatnot. If we find ourselves in a position where a municipality in Georgetown, somewhere, want to legalize marijuana, and somewhere in Scribble, there isn't a structure.
That's not the area of authority. In the area of authority, so what you'll have to do is look to see what are the areas of authority. Marijuana is that one. Right? There are some races that are central, and there are some races that are local.
Go try though. Go try.
In the local things, for example, in one community where it recognizes there's a greater need for certain kind of skills training, local authority could deal with that. It's their purview. In another area, you might realize that we don't need that kind of skills training, we need something else. That's their purview. So there are things they could do differently. In one local authority might decide being got street fair, right? They could decide that. Now we'll say, well, be cool with it, So they could make different decisions influenced by the community. But it's not decisions that are going to go against the national ethos. It's still the national ethos.
Yes.
How critical you think is the vote counting process, and what effect it will have on the elections if we have to wait long periods for the results?
Here's something. These local elections is even easier. Every party individual who participates in the elections is getting results before all the confusion is happening in Chicago. Those parties know the results. Each of them get a copy. Even before GCOM finished knowing the results, the parties know the results. Right? So, in the local elections, it's not just a big area. Right? You've got how many constituencies? Georgetown 15. The parties will know the results. If you are in a constituency, you will literally know the results that come. They all have statements of poll. Right? You know what Jacob did the last time? They said I had an invasion of statement of poll at the top. You take the ones from the bottom. Because there are different streams. Those statements of polls come out in about 8 duplicates. Each party gets one to sign off. Right? A set goes to the returning officer. A set comes straight to GCOM. Right? The law of this country provides for returning officers to tabulate and announce regional results. That's what the law provides for. It's something that's been ignored and not played up. So you could literally hear those 10 results and add them. Literally ignore it, they don't play it up. Right? So if you hear those 10 results, the thing occurring through a GCOM is seconds. Right? So that we just got to know our system and make it work for us. And make it work for us.
And it goes back to what you said before, it's political culture that is influencing how things are going.
Yeah. I have had a problem with GCOM in this sense. My position has been that once a statement of poll has been prepared and issued, every polling station will post this result. My position, if you post it at the polling station, post it on TV same time. Let me stay home and I love it. Right? Post it on TV. Because it's in the public domain already. What is it about not posting it on TV after that?
Because we are chaotic by nature.
Right?
And by virtue of that, we will see those
So
results.
chaos allows for manipulation.
These constituencies that you're talking about, you mentioned that Georgetown has 15 constituencies.
Yes.
Am I to understand that, let's say for example, Queenstown could be deemed a constituency?
Let me give you I don't have the demarcation here, but let me give you the one you're asking about. Constituency 1, Kingston, Commonwealth, Queenstown, Allentown. and Thomas Lands. That's a constituency. It's kind of Georgia was kind of right? No, others bigger than that. But that's a constituency. It is one of the thing about it though is it's like the wards, the old wards. It is not the most populated. Because a great part of it, the Thomas Land and so that.
That's true.
Right? Right? It's not the most populated. Constituencies never have equity in terms of population. And that's how we can manipulate them to get results. Sites.
Is there?
South is a constituency. South up to the whole of South, right up to the Rara was a constituency.
Keeping that in mind, it doesn't local government doesn't seem so local anymore if you consider how many persons in and around that area. You're living in East Belt, I know South and North Belt, West Belt, across there. There may need to be maybe subcommittees for each particular area in order for the efficiency to happen the way it should happen.
Now, two things. As I said to you earlier, that we only have 50% constituencies in the compromise. That's what the parliament draw. But local authorities can work in tandem with community groups. So what you could have now is you have constituencies. In those constituencies, you can have community groups. So the councillor could virtually work with community groups. So you have a leadership of the councillor and community leaders representing all of the areas. It's something that happens in Antigua. In Antigua, they don't have formal local government, but they have community groups. And the parliamentarian associates with the community group in the work as a parliamentarian. So there's a scope for that. And we have a fair number of community groups already operational.
Does it not provide for that?
No, but the law does not do it.
I have time for two more questions.
Yeah, so my question was something similar in terms of
advice to a young person if I'm running for council. What is the advice you would give to me, and what is the best way I can serve in a council setting in terms of if I'm running individual, if I'm running as a community group, what would be the best advice to run?
This is January, right?
yeah, well, it's, yeah.
No. Elections are in March.
Yeah.
One of my first, Georgia is big. One of my first views is that the constituency system makes it easier to participate because it's less costly. You could literally, in the constituency system, in some places, walk from door to door and meet the electorate one-on-one. That's the first thing. Secondly, you should have been active in your community. So that you're not turning up now because of the election. You must say employee. You build down the time. You might have been electioneering, but you've been showing an interest in community development. Now it's election time, you say, that's the man boy, the man is right? Thirdly, this is a critical question, issue. Involvement in local government is not a substitute for employment. Because some people ask, the first question is asked. Right?
So you can keep it a job.
Yes, sir.
You can keep it a job.
Huh?
You can keep it a job.
You have to. In 94 elections,
Yeah.
I went to Blackbush Polder within a year of the election. Half the councils done resign. Yeah. In 94 we introduced the government is on here they had before. They resigned, they said they didn't know it's so. Right? So that too. we have to be able to observe a certain code of ethic. We have to understand good governance in this country. And that's one of the areas in which we very good governance. Transparency, accountability, ethics. It's not about you and your family. It's about a system that gives everybody fair service and fair chance. So the issues we have national are the issues we have local. Are the issues we have local. As the same belief. Local provides an opportunity for certain areas to stand out, to set an example, to see the example and look at things will work. Right? And here's where young people probably could make a difference. In my younger political days, one of my recognitions was as a young person, when you have a family, when you have a house and you have children, you should be less susceptible to corruption. Because you are still in that area of thought and adventure, so you should be less
ideological.
That was my side. Fairly active at points and made that kind of judgment. In my early 20s. In my early 20s. I wasn't, it's like house can come late and them things. Right now it's just shaking up the status quo. No, well, I don't know. In my days I didn't have that problem. In my days I could have joined Melanie Co-op and get a house. You have to get co-op to get a house. When you join Melanie Co-op, all you needed to do is to pay the fee for membership of the co-op. The co-op society got the loan. You didn't have to get a transport to get the loan. Co-op society got the loan, you did self-help, you built your house, you signed a deal, you started paying after occupancy. Houses were that right? It wasn't everybody like the banking. So where you have those housing schemes, like Melanie, those places, it even got food vouchers. There was a community development office. If you did self-help for 48 hours a week, you got a half hamper. If you did for 96, you got a full hamper. And that hamper would be basics. Right? I remember as a schoolboy at Christ Church, we were doing self-help and building the school. 2/3 of Christ Church is built by self-help. The eastern wing and the western wing. Old school in the middle. And I'm not talking that I was involved, I was there before. And we would do block making and so on. And once you chop up 48 hours, you carry home some oil, some flour, some butter, some cheese. The government had a system that helped you those things. So it was different. So we weren't as prone to corruption as might be the case now. You didn't have to get rich that fast.
We have to get some of those present contractors involved.
All right. Any other question? Because we're about to close out.
If I can go, what are some of the pertinent legislation that we should be paying attention to?
A critical issue in local government is valuation of properties. Our properties are highly undervalued. The results of the urban development project, which did the photographic thing of the properties, has not been released. So the councils have not been able to use that as the assessment. You don't need to raise the rate. You need to raise the value, the whole rate. The taxes will go up. I always give a simple example of the problem the councils have, even in the face of their corruption. I spend $48,000 a year to have my parapet, essentially my parapet, weed once a month. $48,000 a year I spend. I pay city council taxes of $23,000. And that service for which I'm paying $48,000, they should be provided. Even if you involve economies of scale, if they give me that service, my taxes can't pay for it. Get the point I'm making? The councils are underfunded. And they have a whole set of property with significant value that paying chicken feed in this town.
But then also you have the issue of the councils not being able to afford the legal assistance to actually take people to court to get the rates and taxes.
I'm not sure that that is the case.
That was an issue that was raised under this administration with the government.
I'm not sure that is.
Why legal officer?
Because these people already have legal officers, you know.
If you understand those councils, that's not very good.
I have one question.
Let's leave that.
I have one question.
Final question.
With regards to rent in, let's say, Georgetown, property owners paying X amount of dollars to the council as rates and taxes, but then the rent that they are receiving far exceeds what they're paying city council. How do you deal with an issue like that? I mean, I think they should. I think
They're not related.
they're not related.
Not related. See, council doesn't use your rent. The rent issue is a central issue. The question is that the councils are underfunded and people are not paying sufficient taxes in this town. The services the councils will provide. I would argue that even if there was no corruption in the council and they spend money efficiently, they would not be able to deliver the services they require to do. And the countryside was saying, people paying $200, $300 a year taxes in this country.
Belinda, last.
Mr. Alexander. I have one question with regards to, for instance, the playfields and the communities. So it will fall directly under the NDC.
Yes. But what the NDC could do, they could establish a committee to look at those playfields, or they could allow a community committee to look at them. Right? So they don't have to necessarily oversee them themselves. They could hand it over to a community, but they are ultimately responsible.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right. That has brought us to the end of the question and answer segment. We just have one other thing to discuss, but before we do so, I'll ask Tabitha to, I don't know if Mr. Alexander wants to, you wanted to say it? Oh, so you say you want me to give her the book now, so. All right. So now I'm going to basically tell you guys a bit about Youth for Local Government and why we decided to start the movement more so. One, we wanted to ensure that young people have an opportunity to get involved in the local government process. Because we realize that political parties aren't going to come down and say, oh, walk in the community, say, come on, get involved in local government, get involved. Nobody's going to come and, ring a bell and wake up people to get involved, because at the end of the day, if the present administration gets a hold of the council, they're happy with that. As much as there is the somewhat a democratic process where individuals can get involved. So we wanted to assist young people in getting involved in the process, and when I say assist, we were looking at helping them with their quote-unquote campaign activities in their constituencies. But what we've realized is because of the time frame in which the election date was announced, and the holiday season, and now with the 6th, the 5th being the last day of submission of symbol and all that, some people might not get the opportunity to get involved because they probably didn't know these dates were this close. Because I remember talking to a young person just yesterday, and they didn't know that the submission for symbol is, the final date is Tuesday. So what we've decided to do is we're going to submit tomorrow a logo for the movement Youth for Local Government, which we're going to give young people the opportunity to run as individuals
under the youth for local government, because we can submit to run under the PR component and the first past the post system. So we're going to, the aim is to register, to submit, and we're going to contest the municipality of Georgetown, and we're going to allow young people in Georgetown the opportunity of representing the youth for local government under their constituency level. You can run as an individual under a group as well. Activities in the communities, whatever it is. Because at the end of the day, we all are working for a common cause, which is to have a better Georgetown and to extent have a better Guyana. And however possible we can support, in whatever way possible we can support, we are ready and willing to do so. So I don't know if anybody here, if you are interested in running in your constituency, if you want to go at it alone, the closing date for submission of your symbol is Tuesday. You can go ahead and do so. If you need support, you can join, you can come on board with the group, and we can help each other in our communities, not because we may not, in our constituency, not because we may not be from the same place, doesn't mean we can't work together. Because at the end of the day, if we're all elected, we'll be working, we will be sitting in the same chamber, more so. So, for me, I think it's a great opportunity for us as young people to get involved. I mean, a lot of people were talking after the election, they're not seeing young people get in this position and that position, but I think this is a place for young people to start. I mean, this is a place, this is a bit, the local government system is a bit complex, so I believe after a few years at it, we will be well equipped to take on central government work after all the experience we would have gained and the knowledge. So I think this is a great place for us as young people. So for those of you who are interested, you can talk to me afterwards so we can just basically go through the plan that we have for that aspect of it. And I think that is all I have to say on that. So now I would ask Tabitha to move the vote at that.
Just before.
Sure.
Sorry. In fact, in the literature, it's argued that local government is the training ground for national politicians. If you look at our own history, not these recent politicians, if you look at Gordon James and those guys, they came through local government. That's where they started. They didn't start national. They were in the city council, Gordon was a mayor and all of that. They came through local government. So it's a training ground for national government. So people should see it that way. Some people just want to arrive at the top. They don't know anything. You know, you need to go through that shoot. I also wanted to say that Coffee 250, an organization to which I belong, and which is involved in public education, will be holding a public forum on the 10th of this month at Christian River College, 3 p.m. in the afternoon, where we will be going through the whole question of development again, even going to detail 9 years. We have 3 presentations, looking historically, electoral, and ultimately development. It's a public forum, the public is invited, and there is no cost in the session. Then the following week, we have a trainer session, where organizations can send individuals who they want to be trained in more in-depth understanding of government, who can then go out and do work with other young people. So we're invited to both the public forum on the 10th, which is 2 Sundays from now, and the trainer session on the 17th. For that session, we may ask for a contribution towards training material and so, but for the 10th, it's an open forum, and the public is invited to that. 3 p.m., Christian River College.
Anybody has any questions for Leon? I guess you could probably ask him after this.
I have some more information. I said I have some more information, but I'll share with those who want to get
Okay. Well, I think we had a very informative evening into the night. I'd like to thank Mr. Alexander for coming on short notice. I guess I think we can all agree that he has a wealth of information, and anytime I'm putting this properly, right? Anytime you see him, you can just actually just stop and have a conversation with him. He's always ready to give any information, any knowledge, any history that he may have on any particular topic. I didn't say this at the beginning. He's also commissioner on the GCOM, so he has that knowledge as well. So you know, he's versed in a lot of areas. He was also registrar at University of Guyana, so there's that part as well. So he has a wealth of knowledge. But anyway, thank you very much, Mr. Alexander, for coming. We really do appreciate what you will have said today, and we really do appreciate your input, and we will be calling on you from time to time as a need may arise as we move forward in this process. So thank you again, and for all of you, thank you for coming. I hope it was informational. I hope that we got what you came for, and hopefully we'll see more of each other. Have a good evening.